right, happy Wednesday. I hope everyone had an absolutely fabulous day. It's absolutely gorgeous here in Georgia today. The weather was amazing, and I feel so fortunate that I got to teach 3 amazing yoga practices and then spend the rest of my day on my porch connecting with some amazing people and doing things I love, like yoga and coaching. So tonight, I thought I would talk a little bit about neurotransmitters and why they're important to understand. When I started to understand the way the brain worked, I had a couple aha moments that have really impacted me in a pretty meaningful way. So our brain has neurons in it, and those neurons send messages through neurotransmitters. And the neurotransmitters are chemicals that are released from our brain into our bodies. And those chemicals actually create a feeling, a sensation, a reaction. And often from that is how we respond. So I thought we'd talk about a few of those neurotransmitters tonight that can totally affect how you act and respond in certain situations. One of my biggest aha moments was when I came to learn that the brain's natural default way of functioning is actually from a place of survival. It's from a place of negativity. And it is not from a place of joy and happiness, that we actually have to work to be happy, that it's not the way we're just naturally going to be. I used to always just think I was a negative person, and I didn't really understand why. Sometimes I actually would go back to, okay, so something must have happened in my childhood, or blame my parents, blame outside circumstances. And for me, when I came to that understanding that this is actually how our primitive brain has been wired, I was like, okay, that makes so much more sense why I tend to default in that direction. But I can tell you that with a little bit of work, a little bit of effort, you can start to manage your mind. You can change your primitive natural wiring, and you can upgrade. So just like our computers, just like our iPhones, every once in a while need an upgrade, they need new software, so do our brains. And that's part of our own evolution. And I believe that evolution comes all from self-awareness. It's starting to understand your own thinking and how your thinking, your thoughts affect every action in your body. So all of our thoughts are actually what trigger the release of the chemicals in our brain. So for example, one of the chemicals, one of the neurotransmitters that we have in our brain is serotonin. And a lot of people hear a lot about serotonin. Serotonin is the one that is often talked about in relationship to depression. And so serotonin is a neurotransmitter that is a good, feel good, happy transmitter. So basically, when it is released, we believe we have gained a social advantage. So when you feel like you're part of a group, when you feel like you belong, then serotonin is released from the brain, and you get this sort of nice, easy, feel good sensation. Now, when you feel that you've been defeated and that you have lost, then serotonin is depleted. So what happens in some people is their constant feeling of feeling overwhelmed and defeated can lead them down a bad trail of anxiety and depression, and then into that negative thinking, just more exacerbated. So we are wired for competition from very early on, from the time we were in the cave, right? Like in the cave, in order to survive, we had to compete for our place. We had to gain social advantage. And a lot of this really makes a lot of sense to me when I talk to the teens that I work with, and their feelings of feeling left out or bullied or feeling a disconnect, and then that feeling leads to them feeling depressed or anxious. And that comes from that same primitive brain of wanting to feel connected. And a lot of us don't understand that is a natural thing that our brains want us to do. So when we start to develop awareness around it, we can start to understand, okay, so my brain needs me to feel social advantage. It needs me to connect. And we can start to take the steps to find ways to connect with people and start to have some compassion and understanding when we feel like we are disconnected. Another good thing to know is that we can put ourselves into a situation from our thoughts that makes us feel as if we have one. And one of those ways is by not giving up, right? Like creating a belief, sticking to it, and taking massive action to conquer those goals. And then we'll feel like we've gained that social advantage. Too often, too many people just give up too soon because they might fail once. But often we need to fail many times, pick ourselves back up in order to be successful. Another neurotransmitter that I wanted to mention is dopamine. And this is another really feel-good chemical that is released. Now, dopamine is released when we anticipate pleasure. So when you anticipate the fact that you are going to get pleasure, not when you actually get the pleasure, it's from the anticipation of it. So for example, when you go reach for that brownie, that piece of cake, or that glass of Chardonnay, right? Like a chemical is released to make you feel good before you even take that first sip. Now, once you take that first sip or take that first bite, it's gone. The dopamine is gone. So what happens is we start to get into this state of constantly needing that next dopamine surge. Now, when we have a steady flow of dopamine, then we'll feel a steady balance of emotion. So for example, a yoga practice, long, slow, steady breathing, moving is a slow, steady way to gain a dopamine surge in your body that will help you to stay balanced. But when we use false pleasures like alcohol and food, shopping, overworking, these false pleasures are just, we are avoiding the emotions so we won't have to feel as much and we can still get that surge of dopamine. So we want to be really careful, where are we buffering and why are we buffering and how are we using them? And are we using it for that constant rush of wanting that surge to feel good? Because life is 50% negative and 50% positive. When we come to accept this, then we know it's okay to sometimes just allow ourselves to not feel good. We don't have to always feel good, right? The goal is to not be happy 100% of the time. The goal is to be happy 50% of the time. And that 50% is going to come from those natural, slow dopamine surges and from just being part of life and living in it, doing the things that we enjoy every day. So another neurotransmitter that I think is really important to understand in the functioning of our mood and our stability in our life is oxytocin. And oxytocin, a really powerful chemical that is released when we feel a connection to a group. So it's not when we feel that we've gained social advantage, but it's that actual connection we feel with others. And so often I'll hear people say, I went along with this group and I felt like something took over me. I didn't even understand why I was doing it. It's almost like I couldn't even control it. And that's when the oxytocin is being released. It's encouraging you to go along with the group, even if it's something you don't align yourself with. So a powerful thing to know is that when you start to build awareness and understanding about this, you can know that the primitive brain is doing this because it wants to survive, right? It's trying to avoid danger. So, but the reality is, in our world, in our lives right now, there is very little danger. Like, a lion is not going to come eat us, most likely, at least not here in East Cobb. So we can say to ourselves, okay, this is my primitive brain. It wants me to connect with this group right now. but I know very well this doesn't best serve me. So then we can override our primitive brain and evolve. And we can start to say, what does best serve me, and make wise choices for ourselves and not let these neurotransmitters dictate our decisions. We can have control of our own lives, of how we feel, of what we choose to do. Another powerful neurotransmitter is endorphins. So endorphins are the anticipation released when the anticipation of pain. So it's kind of the sister, right, to dopamine. When you feel and you think you're going to be in pain, then endorphins are released. And this can be very valuable, especially if like a car like fell over your best friend and then you could lift it up, right? The endorphins would make it so you couldn't feel any pain and you could help your friend pull themselves out from underneath the car. Now, when the endorphins don't serve us any longer is when we start to use them to mask the pain. So for example, people that cut, the endorphins are being released when they sever the skin, and they are feeling this rush, this feel-good chemical, so they don't have to feel the emotional pain that they feel inside. So again, these chemicals can be used in a really helpful way for us, but they also can hinder us. Like a lot of people these days I find are doing really intense exercise, which is actually harmful sometimes for the body, but they're doing it for that constant surge of that endorphin release. When you be really careful, what are we going for? What are we looking for? And what are we trying to create in our life? Now, the last neurotransmitter that I wanted to talk about that I found super helpful to understand was cortisol. And most people know about cortisol. Cortisol is the stress hormone, and it's being released every time that you anticipate any pain. So if you think you're going to be in pain, cortisol is going to flood into your system. Whether you actually are ever going to be in pain does not matter. And the reality is most of the time, we are not. So it is the anticipation and the fear of what could be. And what happens is when cortisol is being constantly released into your bloodstream, into your system, we get an overload of cortisol. We have too much of it. We create stress, and stress manifests into anxiety, depression. It can show up as weight gain. It can even show up as heart disease. Cortisol is so powerful, and the most wonderful news is that we can 100% control it. We can control our stress by learning to manage our own minds. So when the cortisol is released by a thought, I have a thought that I am going to be in pain. Now, if we change the thought to I'm going to be okay, and we realize, okay, this is just a thought and it's not reality, then we can start to decrease the amount of cortisol that is entering into our bodies. Another great way to help balance this is to be proactive, right? When you wake up in the morning, take 5-10 minutes and meditate. This helps us start to build awareness around our thoughts. A lot of people don't realize that when you sit in meditation, your goal is not to stop thinking, but to start to notice your own thinking. And the more you allow yourself to notice your thinking, that's when your thoughts start to get a little quieter. It's from awareness that we are able to manage everything in our life, because all of our thoughts will create every single feeling, and every single feeling in our life is going to create every action we take. And from the actions we take are the results that we create. So when we can get in touch with our own thoughts, not just the feelings, but the sentence behind that thought, then we can start to take back the control over our own brain's chemistry. We can start to surpass our primitive brain. We can tell our primitive brain, I'm not in danger. A lion is not about to eat me right now, and I'm going to be okay. So I hope, like you, some of this information was super helpful for you. For me, when I realized that I have this control over my brain, that I can start to help regulate how the chemicals are released when they're released, I found it very enlightening. I found that I had this desire to now take back that control and to start to live my life on purpose, from a place of being intentional, from a place where I could be calm more often because I knew what was happening. I hope that as you take this information with you, that something will digest and then you can take it into your life and start to incorporate it so you can lead a life that is more balanced, where you can understand that it's okay to sometimes feel negative feelings, and it's also okay to feel the good, feel good, happy feelings. And that when you find that balance, then that's living this thing called life, the human experience. So if you have any comments, any feedback, I would love to hear it. Always want to learn more. If you want to learn more about what I do and about taking back the control of your own mind, please don't hesitate. Reach out to me. I'd love to chat with you. You can just email me at rachel@rachelbethyoga.com, or you can always just message me here on Facebook. We can just grab a coffee and sit down and chat. I love learning about people and their lives and how we can make small, subtle shifts and have a big impact on ourselves. Hope everyone has an absolutely wonderful evening, sleeps well, and get to talk to you. See you soon. Have a wonderful night. Namaste.